Hello from the Channel studio in London and welcome to another edition of Foreign Dispatches, the programme that takes you around the world in 25 minutes. I'm Teniola Oyetayo. On the programme this week, King Charles III postpones public duties as cancer treatment begins, plus a year after Turkey and Syria earthquake, United Nations says the plight of millions of displaced people has worsened. Britain's King Charles III has been diagnosed with cancer and has begun receiving treatment. Less than 18 months into his reign, the 75-year-old monarch has suspended public engagements but will continue with state business and won't be handing over his constitutional roles as head of state. Our London bureau chief, Juliana Olayinka, reports.
The King's cancer diagnosis is the lead story on almost all of today's front pages. Not just here in Britain, but across the world. World leaders have used X to express their shock and, most importantly, to send their best wishes. US President Joe Biden writes here on the platform, "Navigating a cancer diagnosis, treatment and survivorship takes hope and absolute courage. Jill and I join the people of the United Kingdom in praying that His Majesty experiences a swift and full recovery." Buckingham Palace said in a statement released to the press on Monday night, during the King's recent hospital procedure for a benign prostate enlargement, a separate issue of concern was noted. Subsequent diagnostic tests have identified a form of cancer. The 75-year-old monarch is already undergoing treatment and is stepping back from public duties during this time.
I think generally the mood music across the UK is obviously one of shock and one of worry and one of anxiety. He has only just taken up the throne, but it looks on the positive side, and you see pictures of him walking around. He looks like he's in good health. He's working as much as ever he has been in the last few weeks and months. And actually Queen Camilla has been saying how she thinks he's a workaholic. He needs to slow down sometimes. So I don't think you're seeing any of the physical signs of any deterioration, but it is obviously shocking nonetheless.
Known for being a workaholic, the diagnosis is likely to be professionally devastating for Charles, who was the longest-serving heir to the throne in British history before he became king on the death of his mother, Queen Elizabeth, on September the 8th, 2022.
We should really be careful not to overload him, because he started off very enthusiastic, firing on all cylinders, wanting really to change the ecology, change the youths, change this. So he had a real full menu. But right now, he's got to delete everything and make sure that he takes care of himself.
Well, as to be expected, since the crack of dawn, thousands of people have travelled from across the country here to Buckingham Palace to offer their well wishes to the royal family. As the world awaits further information about the health condition of King Charles III, all we can do now is to keep him and his loved ones in our thoughts and prayers.
And over in Gaza, the World Food Programme says more than 500,000 people, a quarter of the population, are facing catastrophic hunger conditions. The WFP says as famine looms, levels of acute food insecurity are unprecedented in recent history. Agricultural and other economic activities in Gaza have largely collapsed since the onset of the current hostilities.
Across Gaza, residential areas have been left ruined, previously busy shopping streets reduced to rubble, universities destroyed, and farmlands churned up, with tent cities springing up on the southern border to house many thousands of people left homeless. About 1.7 million people, more than 80% of Gaza's population, are displaced, with nearly half crammed in the far southern end of the Strip. According to UN Trade and Development Body, the war in Gaza has resulted in an unprecedented level of destruction to its economy, which will take tens of billions of dollars and decades to reverse.
In the worst case scenario, we go back to what it was prior to October 2023. And there, in 16 years, Gaza grew by 1%. The average growth rate in Gaza was 0.4%. And if If that's the conditions prevailing in the recovery or after the war ends or the military operation ends, it will take Gaza until 2092 or 7 decades just for it to go back to its level of 2022. But this basically poses the question, can the international community or the people in Gaza afford 7 decades of such a humanitarian crisis, catastrophic humanitarian crisis? But if we took what was needed after the 2014 military operations in Gaza, what was needed was 3.9 billion. But given the level of destruction we're seeing now, it's going to be multiple times the 3.9 billion that was asked in 2014. And given the catastrophic humanitarian disaster in Gaza now, the tens of billions needed for the reconstruction does not include the humanitarian assistance need for the people in Gaza until the reconstruction is done.
Prior to the recent military escalation, Gaza was already suffering dire humanitarian and economic conditions, with more than 2 million people confined in one of the world's most densely populated areas. There was a severe lack of basic necessities such as clean water, proper sewage systems, and electricity, and unemployment rates soared.
We are dying due to these conditions. It's not like we're living in a house where we have electricity or a place that you can be safe in. The water is coming down on us from everywhere. We used to sleep just like that, but when it started heavily raining, we ran to find cover or shelter. This is not a life.
Nothing is available. No water, no electricity. The house from where I'm staying has broken windows. Kids are freezing in this weather. Look at my kids. No clothes, no water, and also garbage everywhere. We're dealing with epidemics and diseases. We're tired physically and psychologically. Before all of this, we had a decent life. We had homes and we were safe. What did we do to deserve all of this?
Israel's military operation has further exacerbated Gaza's plight, displacing a population which was already dependent on international aid before the war, halting nearly all economic activity and worsening poverty.
In recent days, thousands of Palestinians have continued to flee to the south, which is already hosting over half the Gaza's population of some 2.3 million people. It's like a pressure cooker of despair, people living in the open, in the street. You know, our vehicles can hardly move simply because there are tents all over the place. So what I can say about that is we fear for what comes next. If we look at what has happened in the past, when evacuation orders have been given, people move because of that. They also move because of the fighting moving closer. Then what happens next? Are they truly safe? No.
We talk about desperate people taking food off trucks. What would you do in that situation? Your family is starving. You're starving. This is a population that is starving to death. This is a population that is being pushed to the brink. And they are not parties to this conflict. And that is at the core of this. They are not parties to this conflict. The civilians of Gaza are not parties to this conflict. And they should be protected, as should be their health facilities. And it's not just the amount of calories you eat, it's the quality of those calories. So we're not just talking about food, and we're talking about the quality of the nutrition. On both fronts, the calorie count consumed by Gazans has dropped systematically, and the quality of that nutrition has dropped.
Over 2 million people in Gaza are already extremely food insecure. It means that they're not eating sufficiently, in quantity and in quality, to maintain their health. What is most concerning is this lack of nutrition for a long period of time among children, especially those who are under 5, because when they reach the stage of acute malnutrition, then they are at imminent risk of dying. So we don't want to reach this. Gaza is not a territory that had problems with acute malnutrition among young children. And we cannot reach this stage where then children are at imminent risk of dying because they're not getting the food that they need.
The health situation is also dire. According to the Gaza Ministry of Health, 50,000 pregnant women are at risk of not receiving adequate care in case of complications due to the lack of access to hospitals. Hundreds of cases of miscarriages and premature birth have been reported since the outbreak of hostilities.
We are in catastrophic stage right now because of war. As you see, more than 60 patients, more than 65 patients in just 20 incubator, more than 2 to 3 patients in each incubator. The situation here is more than catastrophe. All of the team here work with no sufficient even medication, equipment. Right now, while we're talking, there are baby right now need mechanical ventilation, and there is no enough mechanical ventilation. As you see, all the mechanical ventilators are fully occupied and on the patient. We cannot deal with all patients and all pregnant and all babies from all Gaza Strip. We cover right now all Gaza Strip from A to Z.
Meanwhile, fears of the conflict spreading continues to rise after the US and UK launched airstrikes against Houthi-controlled areas in Yemen.
The Middle East remains highly volatile. Long-term regional stability demands the implementation of a clear political roadmap in each of these situations. The Secretary General continues his extensive outreach to all key stakeholders to urge all parties to take concrete measures to de-escalate tensions and to work towards sustainable political solutions that aim to resolve rather than merely manage long-standing conflicts. I appeal to the Council to continue to actively engage all concerned parties to prevent further escalation and the worsening of tensions that undermine regional peace and security. I reiterate the Secretary General's call on all parties to step back from the brink and to consider the unbearable human and economic cost of a potential regional conflict.
The latest strikes, backed by 6 other allies, comes a day after the US launched dozens of strikes targeting armed groups in Iraq and Syria that Washington said were backed by Iran. Joe Biden's administration portrayed a wave of attacks as a response to a drone strike that killed 3 US troops at a military base in Jordan on January the 28th, and to ongoing attacks on commercial ships in the Red Sea by Yemen Houthi militia.
Let me be clear. The United States does not desire more conflict in a region when we are actively working to contain and de-escalate the conflict in Gaza. And we are not seeking a direct conflict with Iran. But we will continue to defend our personnel against unacceptable attacks, period. We call on every member of this council, and especially those with direct channels to Iran, to press Iran's leaders to rein in their militias and stop these attacks. They should also press the Syrian regime to stop giving Iran a platform to destabilize the region. As President Biden has made clear, we will not hesitate to defend our personnel and hold responsible all those who harm Americans. That certainly goes for Iran and its proxies. And so we will continue to exercise our right to self-defense at a time and a place of our choosing. And we will continue to hold Iran and its affiliates accountable for their destabilizing actions.
Tensions have been rising in the region since the Israel-Hamas war started on October the 7th. A week later, Iran-backed fighters who were loosely allied with Hamas began carrying out drone and rocket attacks on bases housing U.S. troops in Iraq and Syria.
Thanks for staying with us on the program. It's been a year since a magnitude 7.8 earthquake rocked southeastern Turkey and northwestern Syria, causing widespread death and destruction. Thousands of lives were lost and many were changed forever. For survivors, the recovery has been slow and painful, with many question marks still left about what their future holds. In the early hours of February the 6th, 2023, a catastrophic earthquake struck the border region between Turkey and Syria, claiming over 50,000 lives in Turkey and more than 5,000 in northwest Syria, with thousands more injured. The destruction was extensive, with thousands of buildings, including key infrastructure like schools and hospitals, collapsing under the quake's force. The initial 7.8 magnitude earthquake shook the ground as far away as Egypt. A year later, hundreds of thousands of people remain displaced in Turkey, with many living in container cities, while the rest of the quake-prone country waits in fear for the next big shake.
Turkey is one of the world's largest refugee host countries, while Syria, where millions had been displaced by the 13-year-old crisis even before the earthquakes hit, is suffering a severe economic crisis. In Syria, an estimated 90% of the population live in poverty. 12.9 million are food insecure, and 7.2 million are internally displaced. Turkey hosts 3.4 million refugees, and the earthquake impacted a region that is home to some 1.75 million of them. Despite Turkey's impressive and inclusive humanitarian response, supported by NGOs, the UN, and international community, the impact of the earthquakes is still being felt by both refugees and their Turkish hosts.
The World Health Organization says that the consequences of the catastrophe will last many years to come.
The catastrophe has already taken an excruciating toll on the mental and emotional well-being of a long-suffering population. Many have lost family members and friends. Almost 60,000 deaths were reported in the two countries as a result of the earthquakes, with tens of thousands injured and entire neighborhoods reduced to rubble.
In Turkey, the earthquake created new and urgent health needs in the communities affected, including both host and refugee populations. The disaster disrupted access to health services, including maternal and newborn health care, vaccination, non-communicable disease management, mental health support, disability, and rehabilitation services. The disaster resulted in massive infrastructure damage, displacements, and wreaked havoc on the economy. Increasing tensions within the country and the region continue to exacerbate the already precarious health situation of nearly 15 million people across the country.
Across the border in northwest Syria, amid the lingering impacts of the earthquakes, communities have grappled with shortages of humanitarian funding and a renewed escalation of violence.
After the earthquakes, we saw the lowest levels of hostilities in a decade and fresh diplomatic attention to the Syrian tragedy. This, however, did not translate into real progress. Tragically, 2023 later saw the worst eruptions of violent conflict in years, further exacerbating the worsening humanitarian situation and a lack of meaningful progress on the political process.
With the war in the country now in its 13th year, some 16.7 million people need humanitarian assistance this year, the most since the start of the conflict. In the northwest, more than 43,000 people displaced by the earthquakes have still not returned home. 40,000 of them are living in 70 reception centers and 3,000 in camps. 4 years of historic rains in the northern region of South Sudan have submerged farmlands, ancestral homes and roads, turning Bentiu into an island. About 250,000 people have fled here due to the floods. They now live in IDP sites below the waterline, hemmed in by dikes erected and maintained by United Nations peacekeepers.
Unity State in South Sudan is facing a dual crisis, one born out of conflict and the other out of the climate crisis. Perhaps the most pressing challenge for all in this camp is keeping 3 years of relentless flooding from washing everything away.
We might not be saving these people from bullets, but we are saving them from the floods.
Bentiu IDP camp is home to a fluctuating population of between 100,000 and 250,000 displaced people.
Behind us is the IDP camp and the UNMISS camp, and all around this area is 5 to 6 feet of water.
The camp is the only dry ground for kilometers around, and access is limited to a single road and mud airstrip.
Bantio has been hit by the worst flooding in the last 60 years. And due to this, there's an inundated area of more than 5,400 square kilometers. So this is the challenge which is only faced by Pakistan METF in South Sudan.
Flooding started in 2020 and never relented. It has submerged entire villages and displaced hundreds of thousands. Pakistani peacemakers are on constant guard, providing vital engineering support.
As an engineering unit, we are maintaining supply route, we are maintaining dikes, maintaining the airstrip. We are using our machinery extensively, but still the dikes are sometimes deteriorated.
The most important part of the engineering unit support is dike maintenance.
Flood mitigation and response, it usually starts with the reconnaissance of dikes early in the morning. We carry out these reconnaissance of these dikes on foot as well as the boat reconnaissance. Moving around our dike system, which is now more than 80 kilometers of the dike system which is protecting this Bantio town, we just move around and see physically with our own eyes if there are some weak points that we need to cater for.
Without this constant maintenance, all efforts to keep this vulnerable population safe would be in vain.
There is only one road which is available in this area, which is used by everyone, including the humanitarians and the locals. So if that route is compromised, there is no communication at all.
If the road is cut off, it will impact the delivery of life-saving humanitarian aid.
Rupkano airstrip is the second most busy airstrip in South Sudan. It is a mud airstrip, so it requires constant maintenance used by all the government agencies as well as by the humanitarian agencies.
The Rupkana airstrip is the only way out of Bantio. Without it, the community would be completely isolated from the outside world.
And finally on the program, a visually impaired Tunisian electronics expert is rewiring public prejudice and convincing locals that despite his disability, he's the perfect man for the job. Take a look.
Zohair Al-Riyahi is a blind electric repairman from Bou Arada in the Siliana Governorate. He gained popularity among Tunisian locals after a story was published on social media. It was posted online showing his work repairing electrical appliances, including computers and audio speakers. The craftsman masterly handles electronic appliances in his workshop by relying on his sense of touch, recognizing every piece with his hands. The craftsman speaks about the main challenges he encounters in his career, which have more to do with psychology than his repair skills.
The difficulties I face are to convince people and customers. Some customers bring me malfunctioning electric devices to repair them. But when they discover that I am blind, they change the shop in the belief that my capabilities are limited and I'm unable to repair them.
Zohair Al-Riyahi himself admits that not all customers are happy to be helped by a blind worker.
The customers have reduced my value and professional experience, and this is what affected my psyche and increased my determination to continue working and developing in this field. Some encourage me to continue and respect the opinions of all customers, and I will not be defeated by their negative reading towards me. Today, electronic devices have developed in the world. For example, TVs previously were a large screen, but they have become smart screens. I study and read books of electric specialization through the internet while listening to videos explaining the maintenance process of modern electronic devices. That's added a lot to my life and allowed me to develop and pursue my dreams.
He encourages other people living with disability.
I address my voice to the people with disabilities in the world. There are difficulties. There are also solutions. The difficulties are that I am blind, and solutions are possible in repairing and knowing the components of electric devices. I can also make new devices, helping me to gain confidence and challenge difficulties.
Zuhair al-Rehahi reportedly fell in love with radio devices after he turned blind and started growing fond of radio programs and music. Now his story of overcoming the odds has moved internet users.
And that's the program today. Remember, our top stories are never far away. You can catch them on channelstv.com. Thank you for watching. I'm Tenyola Oyitayo. Bye for now.